Why is there such a huge gap between what we think parenting is going to be and what it actually is?
When I see kids, I'm like, all they want is to be witnessed by somebody. It is the most important thing, I think, as a parent, right?
Why, when we have children, do we think it's going to bring us closer together, but often it really pushes us apart? What are the jobs of mums and dads now?
I remember my mum had this brilliant advice, which is you've always got to forgive yourself.
What's a dad when we're no longer just providers? What's a mum when they often are?
The story was, can you fight? Can you spar? Can you take a hit? Can you hit back? That's what's so soothing about it.
What am I supposed to teach or model for my children when I've no idea what the world is going to look like in 5 years' time?
I always felt like she could trust me, but it was actually me trusting her that she'd be okay. I always thought, she'll know that her mum's always going to be okay. But actually, it's the trust that I know she's going to be okay.
Why did my parents seem to have loads of conviction about these things and I have absolutely none? In this podcast, I talk with experts from all around the world about these problems and hopefully get some wisdom, some insight, and maybe most importantly, some perspective, and find out what it takes to be a happier parent. Dr. Anna Whitwam is a boxer, an author, and a mother. Initially, I wanted to talk to her about a course that she teaches about men in literature, but then I read her incredible book, which charts her journey as a boxer alongside her journey of care and ultimately grief for her dying mother. We do talk about masculinity, alcohol, shame. We also talk about fighting and healing and what we can give to our children when we demonstrate that we have faith in their strength. This conversation moved me deeply, and I hope it does the same for you. I want to talk about your incredible book, but I just wondered if we could talk about the course that you teach, Writing Men, The Burden of Masculinity. Like, wow, that's, like so much of this podcast is actually about masculinity and what are men. Just tell me what we'd be doing if I was on your course.
So it's creative and critical, and it's about my students kind of coming to terms with the idea that there is no strict definition and that all, identity is construct, right? So masculinity it's the plurality of masculinity, that it could be many, 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 many things. And I don't know if I mentioned this to you when we were having a chat more informally. And I said, when I first started the course about a decade ago, I had some students turn up and they said, I didn't know that masculinity was sort of a subject to be analysed or explored, or for academic kind of spaces, which is really interesting, isn't it? So
did you tell me that the people who said that were male?
They were male students, yes. So, I mean, there's a whole thing of allowing and having spaces to reflect on, those models that you've inherited without even realizing. So the course is about my students creating and moving and shifting spaces with the creation of a protagonist of their own doing, of their own creation, and some critical insights. So we look at different texts every week, poetry, plays. We just did Jerusalem, the Jez Butterworth play. Next week we're doing There by Tommy Orange, great writer. So each week we'll be looking at how history, mythology, codes, languages, all kind of move around ideas of masculinity and how it isn't fixed and how it shifts. And of course, I change my reading list every time I teach it too. And it changes. The beauty of the course is that it changes because my students change and they bring in stuff for me to kind of understand, and they have languages that I kind of listen to and understandings that I learn from as well.
As you point out, masculinity could be lots of different things. I'm just wondering if there is do men change? Like in literature, is there a kind of a pattern of a man who's being written 50 years ago, a man who's been written 100 years ago? Like, what are the shifts?
So I start, that's a really good question, because where do you begin? Where do you begin with the kind of, who was the first model?
Man.
Yeah, who's the first man? I think a really interesting access point is the 1950s, and I do all the angry young men stuff. So we do Saturday night and Sunday morning, and that's really interesting because it's post-war. So you've got a lot of, and you've got this kind of obsolete sort of uselessness, or a sense of kind of not being of use, and sort of pub culture, factory culture, a sort of, what do I do? I can't do what my dad did. What's my role here? What am I doing? But also what's interesting about the angry young men movement is that those writers started using working class protagonists, writing those narratives out. So Saturday night, Sunday morning is really interesting because you've got a really problematic, aggressive protagonist with this incredible sort of...
Is that Alan Stilton? Who's that by?
Alan Sillitoe, yeah. And it's a really moving portrayal of a working class male experience. And of course, it was, the working class experience in itself wasn't really something that was witnessed or put into kind of literary fiction. And so the experience becomes incredibly moving. And Arthur, the main character, you see, given these moments of stillness and moments where he is allowed to reflect on experience and his existence and his role and his place in the world. And there's a kind of something that feels quite radical about that. This whole kind of shift into reflecting on yourself and having that interior space and having access to a private self that Sillitoe gives that protagonist. So we start there. And I sort of ask students to kind of look at that, sort of the public and the private, what is allowed, what happens to this sort of stoic, strong, aggressive masculinity when it's given moments of pause and stillness. It suddenly becomes very complicated, and that's what makes Arthur such an interesting protagonist. Because on paper he is pretty awful, but actually there's so much empathy and complexity that comes from the book.
I love that. Which links so heavily with your book. What happens when we're forced to stop and be still,
yes,
and how painful that can be. I just want to dig a bit deeper on that idea of I can't do what my dad did. That really stood out for me there, because I feel like we're this generation of men who, for the first time in a while, aren't like the answer to being a good man isn't just being more like my dad. That feels quite new, and I think maybe that is connected to peacetime. The fact that my dad wasn't at war, in this country, and the military is much smaller. We're in this period of peace. Like, man's job doesn't feel like it is to be at war anymore.
It's about what space am I supposed to occupy? What am I meant to be obedient to? And when you don't have that kind of, because of course,
are we talking about men whose parents were in the war, or men who come back from the Second World War and they're like, what's my use?
So there's that too. There's that argument too, isn't there? I'm thinking, so for me, when I do Saturday night and Sunday morning, I'm interested in Arthur's. He feels like a rebel when you read that book. He feels like he's moving against systems of power. And I think that's really interesting. And it's that my dad served, my father served, and there's an obedience to that. And when you read Saturday night and Sunday morning, he's a very disruptive character. He infiltrates domestic spaces. He he takes a married woman and he messes that up. And actually there's a terrible thing that happens to her in the book. And he's not nice. He's not a kind, she suffers for that hugely. So the writer doesn't kind of move away from those consequences and the fact that, the female characters bear the burden of those, male characters as well, or kind of take on the chaos that they can bring. But I think what's interesting is that he doesn't have that obedience. And I think serving your country or I suppose post-war, that post-war sensibility probably had a lot of men kind of, the sons of these fathers kind of going, well, I don't have something like that. What are my parameters? What's my scaffolding? And, you know, it's sort of back to factory life for Arthur. There's nothing
Yeah.
particularly sort of, you know, what's his role? What's his...
It's really interesting that in the Jonathan Haidt book, which I'm reading because I'm interviewing someone about, you know, smartphones and all that stuff, you know, he gives this rebuttal that our current anxieties are to do with, you know, being on the edge of war and general world events. And he's like, actually, statistically, in terms of measures of happiness, when a nation is at war,
Well,
we all know what we're doing. And we all know what our purpose is.
of that chaos, isn't it? Because we're being told where to place fear and anxiety, aren't we? There's nothing
Yes.
nuanced about it, I guess.
Yeah, we can see the monster under the bed. Yeah.
We
Yeah,
know
that's
that we're
amazing.
fighting against, or some idea of who we might be fighting against. Yeah. Or we're told who we are fighting against.
Have you got any clue as to, you know, I did ancient world studies at university, so I read a lot of kind of epics and kind of ancient literature, and the idea of men as, you know, we all use the word stoic. I think it's maybe a misuse of stoic, but this idea of, we know what we mean when we say stoic, as unfeeling, can push all these things aside, emotionally detached. It's not ancient, right? Like, all, you know, all the ancient heroes are just like, like
Really? Yeah.
all the time, right? Like, quite. I mean, I guess a lot of them are Italian, right? But
It's
I think
drama. Yeah.
it's a drama. Where do we know when this kind of creeps in, that this is what man is?
What, stoicism or the kind
Yeah, that unfeeling. I think it's like a sort of separation of the rational from the animal, or it's something like that, right?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, because I mean, I should have probably studied more of what you studied, because I sort of, my default is the 50s. I think what's interesting, listen to you say that, and when you talk about the kind of, you know, the sort of wailing men sort of image that I have in my head is, so the opening of Saturday Night and Sunday Morning actually has Arthur falling down the stairs drunk and getting to a fight and being sick. And it's such a kind of, actually, quite, I use it a lot in class, those first pages, because it's quite performative as sort of, you know, it's look at me. It's kind of drawing great attention to the self that doesn't quite know what to do. You know, it's a sort of language, isn't it? It's, you will
Yeah,
watch it.
it's acting out.
It's acting out, right? And
We'd all
it's,
call it in a therapeutic sense, wouldn't we?
yeah. So it's like tick the box, been sick, had a fight, fallen down the stairs, kicked out the pub. You know, it's all kind
Fuck
of
me. Like, that's literally
Friday
every
night.
fucking Sunday of my teenage years.
Do you know what I mean? It's that's
Yeah.
what can I do before I have another language, or I've developed another sort of language. This will do. I mean, maybe
Yeah.
you have to have it for a bit. I don't know, but it's not sustainable. But it's definitely, you know, that those first few pages, it's almost comical. The kind of the performative, theatrical nature of him as
Yeah.
really
Okay. Yeah, that's
encouraged
really interesting.
character. Mm,
So I mean, that's almost like, you know, uh, we need to be that kind of ancient Greek or ancient Roman wailing, demonstratively emotional person, and it's
mm,
only through alcohol and violence that we're allowed to do it
right.
in that culture.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they're linked, definitely. I mean, being drunk it gets at all that basement stuff, doesn't it?
Yeah, and you know, it's like I've, you know, definitely had a phase in my life where I drank far too much, and there's a bit in your book where I was like, all
Oh,
of that, yeah. um, but on the other side, you know, it's given me this pathway to have conversations that I never would have had. You
yes.
know, I've
Yes.
ended up with enormous um warm, close friendships that I think maybe wouldn't have got there without that that agent that's allowed me to do what you've kind of just described.
I think that's about them also seeing you in really vulnerable places and sort of forgiving you, and vice versa with those sorts of friendships and that closeness. It's like, I'm just thinking of when I've kind of pushed myself to points of, not quite falling down the stairs drunk, but not far off it. And those friendships that you make, I don't know, that last, not ones that kind of enable, but ones that sort of have witnessed you doing things like that over time. I just think
Are we talking about care? Allowing someone to care for you in those moments?
maybe, and then not making you feel bad about it. I think that's a key thing too. You feel that awful kind of, the guilt of what did I do? And having friends that sort of, I'm just thinking of the friends that I've kept that have seen things like that. They've seen them, and I've, both, and we've stayed very, very strong as friends.
That seems to bring us on really well to shame.
Yeah, I did think when I speak, I was like, oh no, have I gone to this too soon?
Right. But this is appropriate, right? Because I've seen you now talk at two live events. First one I came to see Melissa, who's been on the show, and you were hosting that one. And then like literally as the thing was wrapping up, you went, we didn't talk about shame. Like, and it was like, and then in the second one I came, you see someone said shame, and you were like, shame. Right. So I know you want to talk about it. So go on.
Here I go. I mean, yeah, shame. I think shame is, I remember my mum, the book touches on a lot of this, and I'm not exempt. We've all done things in our lives that we kind of go, oh, I wish I hadn't. And I remember my mum had this brilliant advice, and she had lots and lots of brilliant advice, but one of the best pieces was, she said, you've always got to forgive yourself. And I think that's so interesting. And I pass that to my daughter as well. I pass that on to my partner. I pass that on to friends, because I think it's truly such an important thing. Because if you get caught in shame, shame turns into lots of other things, right? Shame turns into really, really painful bits and pieces and pathways, and anger is one of those, rage is one of those. And that's not to say that those things can't be healthy, but they also become patterns of behavior too. And I think shame can swallow you really quite it's a dangerous kind of hole to fall into. And I think I probably with this book was trying to kind of, it's about grief, but it's also about, and I hope it's okay to talk. I'm fine with it because it's in the book and I've spoken about it elsewhere. The scars on my arm, that I felt incredibly sort of the shame that comes with that. And it was really interesting in the boxing gym. It was just nothing. It was just exposed. And it kind of, because of that, it just sort of dissolved. And all that sort of need to hurt myself and all that history of hurting myself sort of faded away. And that was very caught up in shame. That's a shame thing. So I think moving through that was really important. But I think, I think shame is really dangerous. And I think trying to make people feel ashamed of themselves is a cruel thing too. It's a nasty thing to get stuck on.
I mean, when you said that, the thing that your mum said about forgive yourself, and shame for me is like, it's just a common thread with addiction, all the people who really struggle with addiction, that is right there. And in my own struggles with various addictions, it's that is what is underneath that. And actually the reason judging people and trying to make them feel ashamed is so powerful is that it elevates us, right? It lifts us up because it makes them small. And what it just occurred to me there when you were like, forgive yourself. Actually, if you're constantly standing in shame with yourself, you're never really you're never really sitting in the real emotion. You're somehow being like, I get to elevate myself by shaming myself. It's like, you're bad. I'm still outside of the thing. I
Definitely.
can't, I
I'm
can
not
set.
really acknowledging the thing that I should be or could be or I'm supposed to be ashamed about.
Yeah, it's somehow avoidant.
Yeah. And it's a ritual you get stuck into and a kind of victim narrative, which is so dangerous. And that kind of, I've done this, so I'll do it again. I've done this, so I'll do it again. And that's all part of addiction, isn't it?
Do you think, in the first conversation we had, I said to you, I think shame may be more problematic for men because of this. There's two theories, right? One is the evolutionary theory, which is that basically you don't need a lot of men. You only need the best men. So being less than as a man is life or death, right? It's just, you're not needed. We need lots of women to have babies. We don't need lots of men. We just need the best ones. And then the other theory that I've come across is that basically men are raised more punitively.
Yeah.
We're punished more easily. We're attributed with anger. We're told what we're doing is bad and wrong. So from an early age, we become less good at processing guilt. The thing I've done is bad, and it sits as shame. It's, I'm bad.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think there is a gender difference? I mean, you write pain so beautifully, and listening to you now, I'm like, no, I think we feel the same about this thing,
Yeah.
shame. Like,
no, I think it might. I don't know. I would say that it's a shared experience because I think maybe the way it's articulated is different. I think I'm just trying to think of myself and some women I know. I think there is a kind of, this shame will become part of me and it will not, and I will feel ashamed of myself and I will kind of diminish myself. I guess, my self-harm was part of that. But then I think, I don't know, I feel like that might be one that's sort of person specific. Because I think men also would do the same. I don't know. I mean, there's a kind of thrashing out or lashing out, but again, people use terrible methods to express shame and kind of try and, as you say, not live in it or kind of not live beyond it. So sort of get stuck in it, and you can develop terrible habits with shame. I suppose the only thing that I have noticed at my daughter's school, primary school, her old primary school, was that she overheard boys talking about things that they didn't really understand, that they'd overheard or watched or seen, and they were quite explicit. And as we were walking to the bus stop, the teacher said, you need to know this. And I was really keen. And, knowing, I don't know, with all this sort of stuff learned, I wanted her to speak to me about it and tell me what they'd said, because I didn't want her to hold it as her thing. And she blushed when she told me what they said. And I said, but this isn't anything. I said, and I sort of said, thank you. I'll take that now. That's mine. I'm going to carry it. You don't have to deal with that now. But I was so interested that at 9 years old or 10 years old, she'd blushed at something other people had said. So she knew that it was wrong. She didn't quite understand what was being said, but she knew the wrongness of it. And the wrongness became her responsibility. And that I thought was really interesting. And I was trying to take it off her when we were walking to the bus stop, because I was alert to something happening.
So fascinating that, because I remember now, now you're saying that, my first kind of encounters with the sexual and sexual feelings, or reading something in a book, and the way that made me feel was enormously exciting, but I knew it wasn't to be shared. Do you know?
Yeah.
It wasn't like, guess what, Mum?
Yeah.
As that would, but maybe that does suggest maybe there is something inherent.
And they were sort of making the noise about it. I think there's that, isn't there? It's like, who gets to make the noise about it and who sort of kind of stays quietly with it. And it obviously affected her. And, I can't take that away from, her life now. She heard what she heard. And those boys don't know what they're even talking about, you know, and actually what they said was ridiculous. It didn't even make any sense. But it was the idea that she knew it was wrong. She'd heard that it was wrong and told the teacher because she knew it was wrong, but that she still walked out of school kind of carrying it with her, which kind of, it's a kind of shame, isn't it? I guess she was working with there was shame around that whole day, and she kind of took some of it.
Yeah, but then you broke through it and was like, hi, you know, like
Give it here.
Shame is so solitary, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's powerful.
I want to talk about your amazing book, like in more specifically, but just linking it to Sylvie, your daughter. You know, the book starts with you in a fight in the ring, not going well. It's tough reading. Like, as I said, you write pain amazingly. The book itself is the physical book. I'm holding it up for people who are listening. Is small and pink and purple with this kind of diaphanous cover. It's like this very beautiful feminine thing. There's this little Anna in the book early on in the boxing gyms who doesn't really want to take up space, who doesn't know where to stand, and she's small and she's not supposed to be there, really. But then there's also this Anna the mum who is, I'm going to say, paternal. Like, you take Sylvie around with you to all these boxing gyms. It's such a dad thing to do. It's exactly me and Lila. It's just like, this is my world. This is what we're doing. I think you're awesome. You're fucking coming with. Like, and I just...
You're with me the whole time.
You're with me the whole time, but we're not just doing things that are childish and are about you. You're coming into my world. And I just wonder, like, where that comes from, because there's so much of maternal anxiety which could be cured by a bit of that.
I think actually that's probably to do with being a single mother from the age, she was about 1.5 when I wasn't with her dad. So a lot of that is simply like, I need to do this, so you have to come with me. There's just no, dinner parties, all the things that I didn't want to miss out on. Obviously, she wasn't coming raving with me or anything, but it was like nice with nice friends. Yeah, that'll come. But she'd be part of everything. And I think it's, but then my mum sort of did that with me, and she was with my dad till she died. So I don't know if it's about single parenting.
As someone who's trained quite a lot in boxing, Muay Thai, like various things, for me, going to a new gym itself was quite an anxious experience. Whereas you in the book, I don't know, you're like, you get to this place where you just walk into these places, like, there's just a real contrast between the different Annas.
What, so for you, it was just hard to kind of reconcile me in the ring and me in the world, the rest of the world sort of thing?
Yeah.
Well, maybe
it's almost like in the ring, you went on this journey where you had to start again from nothing.
Yeah.
Like, to start be somewhere that you weren't supposed to be, and turn that place into somewhere that you were supposed to be. But actually, Anna outside of the ring, despite everything that was going on with your mum, was very confident and capable. And have I got that right?
I think it's because I had to learn a new language. And I think also there's something about that gym, those people that, and the boxing, everybody has stuff going on. Every single person that goes into that gym has stuff that they are dealing with. And it wasn't, there were people grieving, there were people going through all sorts of experiences and all sorts of violences. And you just it wasn't the story. The story was, can you fight? Can you spar? Can you take a hit? Can you hit back? That's what's so soothing about it, I think. And that's why people are drawn to it. It's so, everybody has stuff and nobody's going, do you want to talk about it? And because that's, you can, but it's about, once you step into that ring and the bell goes and you've got to do a whole round, that's all. It's just like a meditation, and it's stripped down and you become sort of not a simplified version of yourself, but a sort of more, I guess, a more sort of cosmic one in a way, a sort of primal self who that stuff is not part of what's going on in the ring. You can, in fact, you don't want to be thinking about that in the ring. You just want to, it really is, you know, when I first started sparring, my head, it was like, don't burst into tears when you get hit. Honest, that was where I remember you kind of have a sort of focus point with each spar that you want to improve on. And right at the beginning was get hit, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry for the first few weeks. And then, you know, then you're more confident with that. So then you start to be able, I mean, I couldn't even hit people back at the beginning. I was so nervous of hitting somebody in the head and in the face, especially women. I was like, I can't. And then you can because they hit you. So it kind of starts the conversation. But yeah, I think it's that it's not important, that stuff, when you're boxing. It's a different chat, different language. So going around the world is you're far more the grieving daughter when you're outside of the boxing gym.
Yeah, she's not really allowed in the ring.
Mm-mm.
If she went in, she'd get really fucking hurt, right? There's no space for her in there. Yeah.
And now trainers said, leave your stuff at the door. Just leave your stuff at the door and come in. And then everybody's the same, you know?
Now, I've been reflecting on why I spent so much time kind of in the gym, particularly jiu-jitsu, because I didn't like it and I wasn't very good at it. And it really, actually, you know, as you do so well in the book, getting punched in the head is deeply unpleasant, but it doesn't actually hurt. But actually, jiu-jitsu just hurts all the time. And I was like, why? And I come to the conclusion that actually, because I work with young kids and because I'm like a really kind of present father and I'm like, it kind of bought me this kind of masculinity thing that allowed me to be like, do you know what? I don't give a fuck about doing these things because I know exactly how tough I am, which wasn't even very tough, but it didn't leave that question unanswered. Yeah. But actually, what you're saying and what your book, I think there's another side. If you're someone who lives in your head a lot anyway, you know, like an author, or, you know, I'm just constantly in debates, to have this sport where you cannot be there. You cannot be there. You have to be completely in that space, in that body. It's just demanded of you. I think maybe that was it as well.
Definitely. I think there's something that the luxury of only being in your body and being out of your head. I suffer from that so much, being in my head. It's you know, it's painful to just the kind of over analysis, the worry, the shame, the stress, all the anxiety, the kind of going over. To be just in your body it was such a joy. And it was so good for me to just have that. I really miss that, actually. I really miss the
So have you replaced it with anything?
I do feel like being in a new relationship definitely changed my response to violence, because I just didn't. Your focus is elsewhere, isn't it? You just focus on different things.
I just thought there was something in that where you were like, when I was with this man, I had to learn not to fight.
Yeah, and there was that thing in Liverpool where we went to see. It was just after I'd met him. We went to see a boxer called Zach Chelly fight, and yeah, even thinking about it now, I'm so ashamed of that. There you go. There's my shame. He saw me kind of nearly get into a fight with someone in the arena because he told me to sit down, and I'd had a drink, and I said, "Who are you talking to?" And I also had some male boxers behind me that from the gym that I knew as well. So I was kind of pumped up and full of ego. And he started shouting at me, and this guy that I just started sort of dating was just like, and I stood up at one point. I remember my drink knocked over, and I was like, I won't say it now, but the things I was saying were just kind of, I just was shouting at him, and this guy was just like,
my friend, like, I just want to help you share this, that Eloise has seen me do exactly the same thing. It's just like, who are you asshole? Like,
you absolute, and that kind of like, and he was just like, let's have
a little swim in our shame together.
Yeah,
on a
yeah. Do I
podcast.
intervene? Do I let her fight? Do I do the kind of, am I the guy that sort of stops her fighting? But yeah, it was really interesting how much of that was still so ready. And I would have absolutely just carried on. And eventually someone escorted the man away. But it was just like, I felt sort of invincible and indestructible. And like I could just take huge men in Liverpool on just ridiculous behavior. But I don't know. Maybe that was the last, maybe that was a bit of me doing a bit of Saturday night and Sunday morning kind of performative, this is how ugly I can really be. Do you still like me? That sort of,
But yeah, okay, yeah.
still like me now, and he's like,
shoveling kebab meat into your face.
oh God, just curry sauce everywhere.
It's
Just
so
like,
good, that bit. Sorry, it was.
but it's so, you have to kind of, it was like, I actually had therapy about a lot of that behavior. And that came from her. She's like, you were probably trying to show your ugliest side in that moment. And it was. And that's what I thought it was worth writing about, because it was literally just like, got into a fight, had a kebab, conked out. Do you know what I mean? Like, it was just woke up, like, still, just awful.
We started, right, with this idea that these men being I didn't realize masculinity was a subject. I started all this by reading books by women about motherhood, right? That's how I got into this. So obviously I've read books by women before, but to read about this time of life that I paid real attention to from this other perspective was just mind blowing. And we basically can't understand masculinity without that other voice. There's no relief. There's nothing to hold it against. So, in your book, you talk about this moment of going into the gym and having this thing of like, I want them to fancy me, but I want them to take me seriously.
Yeah.
And there's a dichotomy, and it's like, it's moments like that when I'm like, right, because for men it's the opposite. It's like, I won't be fancied unless I'm taken seriously.
Right. So please take me seriously, and then
take me seriously, and then I can be desired.
Yeah.
It's almost the reason why we want it. Like, and it's just amazing, like to have those framings and the way. There was another thing. What was when you were in the talk? I think it was Jessie Burton said to you, she was like, you were like, and it was always, actually, it was the men who cared for me in the gym. If there'd been a rough spar, they came and helped me with my bloody nose or whatever. And she was like, did they do that for the other men? And I almost jumped out of my chair. I was like, no, God, no. Like, if you'd had a rough spar, some guy coming in helping you out.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
But then that's so sad. That's so sad that men can't care for men without it being diminishing. It's like, but it takes these female conversations for us to realize what masculinity lacks, I guess is what I'm saying.
And that's it. It is a conversation. It has to be a conversation. And that's what over the years that the class I teach has become more mixed, and there are kind of a nice balance of men and women in the class. And I'm really interested in that. It has to be a conversation. It cannot be a telling off. It cannot be this is bad, this is good, which is why fiction is so perfect, because fiction and art generally will allow for lots and lots of kind of knotty portrayals of people, and it can press and prod and sort of push against things and make conversations happen, So, but yeah, no, I don't know if they did that for other men. I just remember there was a really, really bad spar. And I remember someone having to sort my hair out and kind of put tissue up my nose but they also kind of, you laughed a lot when you're in pain in that gym. I don't know if that's something that you find, there's a lot of laughing at yourself and at each other. And I think that's a very, very healthy thing, especially, if you're walking into a gym. And this isn't like, this is what I'm used to. It was just a kind of awful mindset developed from adolescence, growing up too fast in London. If I walk into this space, my currency is you have to sort of fancy me, because that's how I will get through to the next bit of what I want to do. It's so unhealthy, but it's so great to laugh at yourself because it knocks that completely away and you stop. I mean, you talk about taking yourself seriously, but it's also something about not taking that bit too seriously, I think, and having a face hit and having a bloody nose and walking around looking like, I think one of the guys, a guy from Newcastle, when I was kind of finished with The Spy, said, "You look like you've been out in Newcastle on a Friday night." And I just remember finding it so funny because I had been crying and I was sort of limping. It was when I got really badly hit there and I was in so much pain, but I remember laughing and I thought, this is what a great, I didn't think that at the moment, but I think, looking back, what a great thing to be able to do.
So there's a brilliant moment in the last talk that you did where you were saying, I think this is I'm not expecting this book to be a big success because I think it's quite niche. I think it's quite particular. And it was this guy in the audience who was like, "I think you're wrong. I think this is a book about healing." And I thought that was so gorgeous because that's actually, that is, the book opens with you losing the fight, and it opens with, there's no spoilers here. My mum was dying, and she was dying for, and then really there's this beautiful parallel in the book between the way your body heals and it giving you the faith. I'm going to buy this book for both my brothers for Christmas and they'll read it because it's about boxing. But the reason, and I've spoken to them about this, but it's because my parents are getting old and they don't have daughters. They've got 3 sons. And the same way we've had to kind of access some maternal with our kids. I just think there's this, it is so feminine, the care for your mum. It's the washing and the bathing. It's just, it's painful and gorgeous and complicated. But I was like, I want that.
Yeah. 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 Well, that's a language too, isn't it? It's that language of caring for somebody. I was talking about this the other day. I was actually talking to Sylvie's dad about this, saying Sylvie gets really unafraid by age, and she's really unafraid by, she loves, when she watches something, she'll always be drawn to the older actresses and she finds them beautiful. And I think she sees beauty in women who are getting old because they remind her of her grandma. And I think that's because she was allowed to be part of that care and saw my mum and saw the way we held mum, and that she was seen as so beautiful right up until she passed. Even, when she had died, Sylvie was allowed to see her. And I think it's so lovely that she's got this lovely relationship with aging and the body, and seeing a body like leave the world as a thing to kind of be part of as well. I mean, I think she's got a real understanding of, and it's a maturity you get as well, part of that. But yeah, she understands, people fading.
But it also seems like it's a maturity as, yeah. It feels like a maturity that she's got, and I think my daughter has as well. That's come through kind of like faith in her. Do you know what I mean? It's like you've let her into this world. You at the beginning, she's there in the fight, watching you get knocked out, take the hardest blows possible, and then knows that you come back stronger. And there's this faith in you to allow her to see that.
I trust
and to be around someone who's dying. Yeah, there's a trust that.
I think that's, you've just hit something so clever, because I didn't think of that. I always felt like she could trust me, but it was actually me trusting her that she'd be okay. I always thought, she'll know that her mum's always going to be okay. But actually, it's the trust that I know she's going to be okay. So you can come into this room and see your grandma hours before she's going to die. You can come to my fight because you will be okay. I know that you're going to be okay. I'm your mum,
And then oh, sorry, get quite upset. But that, the bit I messaged you and I was like, oh, your book made me sob the other day. Was your mum doing that to you?
Yeah.
It was your mum saying to a nurse, she's strong, this one. Go on, you girl. Go on, our girl. And Eloise, like, Eloise came running through from the other room. I was like, what's up? What's happened? I was just sat reading your book.
Oh God,
Because
sorry.
it's beautiful. It's beautiful, but it was so, it was so my mum. It's so, my mum's alive, but it was just like,
Could hear her voice.
that's my mom. Like, and what you lose, what you've lost, and what I will lose is just the ultimate cheerleader. It's just like this person who thinks everything I do is fucking brilliant and that I can do anything and celebrates everything I do, but is never really surprised when it goes well,
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And that witness that our children also need. And I think that's so, when I see kids, I'm like, all they want is to be witnessed by somebody. It is the most important thing, I think, as a parent, right? Just witnessing their experience, whatever it is, being that person. So I had to maybe I wrote this book as a way of kind of making mum be that, I guess. She wasn't there for the training, she wasn't there for the fight, but this book has kind of placed her
puts her
there.
there.
Yeah, brought her back a bit to kind of a place where I could, see her, or she could see me, maybe.
Can you read the bit about what you just said? So I've just realised that's what that bit's about. 186.
I have to teach myself to live with her death, to let my mum meet me where I am. I have been seeking her out in some other world, where the dead sit in some celestial silver mist, in suns and moons, the purple slit between night and day, and wait for us to find them. I had never considered she could in fact find me every day, that it was the other way round. She would die and return to me, that I could be her home. It's what she promised that day on the balcony when we got her diagnosis, and when I asked her how I'd find her, when death was still just in its abstract, she turned to me with such certainty. I'll find you. Don't worry about that. Sorry.
It's so beautiful. It's so painful and it's so beautiful, but it's so, I think, all the things that we're talking about with our children as well. It's that, it's that faith and that I'm here. I'll be the one to find you. But then you're there with this book, making, ensuring that happens.
Yeah. I'm literally looking at the balcony it happened on as well. It's just behind me to my right. And we were sort of smoking. Yeah. I remember the exact conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. I just finish up with something slightly less emotional.
Well,
So just pull it together here.
no, but you don't know what to say. You're like, I'm sorry, but also, I don't know I'm glad you feel something, but I'm also don't want you to cry.
Yeah, definitely don't. I think, it's very odd, the human desire to stop other people's tears. The tears are wonderful. They're full of morphine and they're the cure. They're really, really great. But we're like, it's all right, don't cry, as if the crying were the issue. But what am I crying about? Mortality. The fact that that I will lose my parents and my kids will lose me.
Yeah.
That's what I'm crying
That's
about.
what gets me when I look at,
Mm. What are you working on at the moment?
I'm working on another book of fiction, and it's set in the West
Awesome.
Country, but it's not a real West Country. It's a made up one, and it's all about it's women. It's pretty much a sort of version of everything I've ever written, which is women and sort of the way they treat each other, and sort of there's a little bit of the kind of witchy stuff underneath it all. But this idea that, you know, I'm very interested in this idea that women are meant to be nice to each other all the time, and sisterhoods, and what currents that can run through that, and streaks of kind of the way they don't look after each other as well. Small places and small spaces.
So that's really you know, the difference between the nature of male and female friendship is something I kind of talk about with my kids a lot as well, because Lila's friendships from a very young age were political and sometimes emotionally damaging. Like, she went through a kind of rough period at the age of kind of 10, which in the end, I think actually has made her the amazing person she is, having like that toxic kind of friendship quite early and being like, oh no, now I know your sort. I know you when I run into you again. No, you're all right. She can see it a mile off.
Yeah.
So that's been great. And then my beautiful boys, whose friendships are just, I don't know, it's like this kind of unquestioning loyalty that I always think of the bit in Trainspotting where, you know, Begbie's just done something awful and thrown a glass at a bird or whatever, and he goes, well, he's a mate, so what can you do? And it's very much like that. And they both have these, obviously there's something wonderful in fierce loyalty, but then there's no accountability there at all. And then Lila's, you know, this kind of much more demanding, exacting female friendship, to me, can look exhausting. But then I often think when that goes well, those friendships seem much deeper.
Accountability is such an important thing. I think to love someone properly, you have to hold them accountable, and vice versa. I think that's all relationships. It's interesting that, you know, loyalty is fine, be loyal, but what are you being loyal to? And, you know, in the same way that friendships have to shift and change and grow and develop, and you can't, I think this is something you can't keep the same friends forever necessarily as well. I think that's something, I mean, I've got some core, you know, your core friends I've had since I was at university and at secondary school, but not all of them, you know,
No,
not all of them. And you shift and you change. You have to move, I think. So
I remember like mates from when I was young, like 50, you know, being like, you know, you've changed. And it's like,
I hope so.
I would hope, one would hope so. Yes.
Yeah. In the same way that you kind of meet, and it's lovely when you go out with your mates you were at school with, and you know, you all party together at 15, 16, you kind of go back to being 15 and 16 when you're together, and it's lovely, but you're like, I could not do this every weekend. You know, I'm 43. So there's that kind of pull back to old friendships, which is lovely, but you realize also that you have changed, and so have they. Everybody has and should, I think. There's something really useful about changing and shifting and moving. I don't know, for me, I look at Sylvie and I'm very grateful at the moment she's got lovely men in her life. I don't know if that's I don't know why that matters to me at the moment, but it really does. And I think she's got women, she's got me, and she's got my sister, and she's got a godmother, great women, but she's got her dad and my partner and her granddad and her uncle, my sister's partner. And I kind of am so relieved that they're all really different, but they're all really solidly there for her. And I think that is a lovely, lovely thing for her in terms of when I look at her walking around, she's confident. I don't know if you feel like this with Lila, who I've met, who is equally so, but it's that sort of that confidence when they walk through the world. And I think, yes, it comes from me, but it definitely comes from this lovely sort of network of men.
I think that's lovely, isn't it? Because I think a lot of the time when we talk about the role of fathers, it's often with regard to the effect we have on our sons.
Yes, definitely. And we always talk about villages of like women, right, who look after children. I feel in my head that we've assembled, or the world has assembled for us, this lovely sort of network of men around my daughter. And I think it's, and she feels really, really comfortable with all of them. And that's, my dad is picking her up from school today, and my partner's picked her up before, and her dad, it's just lovely. She's got this kind of little assortment of great men who just turn up for her.
The book that we were discussing is called Soft Tissue Damage. Anna Whitwam has another novel called Boxer Handsome, which I haven't read yet, and I'm really looking forward to getting into. You can find Anna at anna.Whitwam on Instagram. Please follow me at Be a Happier Parent on Instagram and TikTok, and I look forward to seeing you all next week.